So the United States experienced record levels of people filing for unemployment last week to the tune of was it 3.28 million people, almost 3.3 million people lost their jobs during a 1 week period, just completely obliterating the previous record that was set. I believe it was like in October 1982. The most that filed during that period was around 695,000. So that's, five or six times more people filed for, unemployment last week than the previous record, which is just nuts. And this is the highest amount of people filing for unemployment in the U.S. since the Department of Labor started tracking these statistics back in 67. And, this is just going to keep getting worse before it gets better. The economy is basically just in shambles at this point, and was the head of the St. Louis Federal Reserve, the president of that, I believe their name was James, or their name is James Bullard. He was speculating that unemployment could potentially reach 30% due to this coronavirus pandemic. And there was, let's see, it was the Heidi Sherholtz, a economist at the Economic Policy Institute, was saying that by summer, they were projecting that there could be 14 million people who lost their jobs due to this pandemic, and how it's really negatively impacting the economy. And I mean, if we saw 3 million last week, we're probably going to see at least that, if not more, this week. So I think that 14 million number is actually pretty low, and it could be 20, 30 million people plus losing their jobs by this summer. And our government, the people in power, to a large extent, have not, or are not taking this seriously with ways to really help out the average everyday person in the U.S., whether they have a job or not, whether they're, retired, whether they're part of the informal economy, or they're a low-wage worker or whatnot, just not really taking it seriously to meet the level of crisis that we are currently experiencing. I mean, 3 million people lost their jobs last week, and this government stimulus package is just, trying to put a band-aid on on a flooding, on a dam that's falling apart. It's not going to work. It's not nearly enough for the challenges that we are currently facing, not to mention that these stimulus checks aren't going to reach people for at least 3 weeks. And again, those funds will only be going to people who have bank accounts and direct kind of routing information on file with the IRS. For the people who don't, which is, I believe, a pretty good chunk, they're going to have to wait another 3 or 4 weeks. So it's going to be a couple months before a good chunk of the people who actually be getting these funds will receive them. People are getting laid off. People are having their hours cut. People are having to stay home to take care of their kids. All of these different things. And, people are going to have rent and mortgage payments due a couple 3 or 4 days. What today's March 27th, rent's due. People are still gonna have to put food on the table, pay car notes, pay utilities, all of these things. And $1,200 check 3 weeks from now isn't gonna help that. And again, $1,200 is not nearly enough, as Bernie was proposing needed to be at least $2,000 a month for the duration of this. And I mean, it's just really, just shows really how disgusting and corrupt the U.S. government is when, all of these, the corporate bailout package got tied in with actually giving relief to the American people. The, the legislation, first off, should have obviously focused on helping people, and we could figure out later, once we figure out actually to help human beings, how to help these big, massive corporations later on. Shouldn't have been tied in with that. But I mean, just think about that. 3 million people, or 3.28 million people, I should say, lost their jobs in the U.S. last week. A record number. Previously, it was under 700,000. I mean, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, I think, unfortunately. And I mean, it's going to get so bad that I think the government is going to have to respond in a New Deal fashion at some point to ameliorate some of the suffering and misery that people are already experiencing and will continue to experience. I mean, 3 million people being laid off from their jobs due to this pandemic, that is a huge, massive number. And then you have, Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, saying, those numbers are not relevant, in his words, not relevant. 3.3 million people losing their jobs last week, not relevant to the Treasury Secretary. Again, most of the people in power are already very wealthy and powerful and don't really give a shit about me or you, the average, everyday working class person in the U.S. They just care about protecting their own wealth and power and protecting their, corporate cronies and donors and keeping those people happy. So, I mean, we got to keep, fighting and, making sure that the government's actually responding to the needs of the people. And those needs are really huge right now when you consider, we had record unemployment, people filing for record numbers of unemployment last week. We might have 30% unemployment. The economy is just in shambles at this point, and our government needs to actually start taking it seriously and figuring out how we can help people to get through this mess. So, a little bit of doom and gloom, but we all need to find our small ways that we can help each other out during this, whether it's contacting maybe older family members or friends to see if they need help, if you can go pick up groceries, drop them off for them, checking in with your next door neighbors. If you have extra food, my partner has been posting it on this Buy Nothing group on Facebook, and we've been been able to provide some people with some food that way. So, I mean, we can all find different ways that we can engage in mutual aid and acts of solidarity to really just kind of come together and help each other out during these times, because it's clear our government is obviously not up to the task of actually addressing, the needs of the people during this really troubling time, which is obviously really, fucked up and sad. But again, we can find ways to help each other out, and so that's what I want to try to focus more on. And I would love to hear about maybe some ways that you've engaged in mutual aid, and maybe some suggestions for other people to kind of engage in that process. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours in the comment sections down below. Peace. Much love.